Scott Van Pelt at 10:25. Nikki Javala will join us on the show today at 11. Josh Robbins a little bit later on in the show. We'll talk about the Wizards and the debut of Trae Young coming up tomorrow night in a Wizards uniform. Yesterday, I tweeted out after the reports that Jonathan Grenard, the edge pass rusher of the Minnesota Vikings, could potentially get moved. The Vikings are in cap hell right now. They're trying to get out of it. And I just tweeted out Adam Schefter's report of that and said, count me as interested. My favorite response was from Kid Quick, who said, Sheehan is Vinny Serrato. That's a good one. I like that one. The other one was, do you understand we don't have any draft picks? Yeah, I understand all of that. Count me as interested nonetheless, Kid Quick, and everybody else that seemed to have an issue with it. I don't know if you've looked at our roster yet, but we essentially are missing a third of the players that will need to actually report to training camp. About 30 some odd players are not under contract. We have fewer players under contract than every team in the league with the exception of one. So we've got to add players. How we do it should be fun here over the next few months. I'm looking forward to it. But count me in on Jonathan Grenard. Here is a player that if you've watched the rest of the league, whether it was him in Houston or him in Minnesota, he's a legit edge pass rusher. He's better than anything we had on our team, healthy or unhealthy, last year as a pass rusher. We saw it up close and personal. Not that he had a lot of sacks, but he led the game in pressures when Washington played Minnesota. That was not what we would call this past year. Among all of the non-stellar efforts, that may have been the most of the non-stellar efforts. The most non-stellar, 31-0 Vikings. And Jonathan Grenard wreaked havoc in that game, as did the Minnesota defense as a whole. But I've always been a Jonathan Grenard fan. He's a really good pass rusher. He's basically been in the top 5 to top 10 in pressure rate over the course of his career. He did get hurt and miss a few games down the stretch, but it's not, one of those injuries that would keep him from missing any time next year. His best season was his contract year in Houston. He had 12 and a half sacks. And then in his first year after signing in Minnesota, and playing for Brian Flores' defense, by the way, Durante Jones, a part of that staff, he had not only 12 sacks in 2024, he had 4 forced fumbles in 2024. He is an absolute stud, not at Myles Garrett's level, not at Max Crosby, TJ Watt, Micah Parsons level, no. But he has been considered now and still to be one of the league's more impactful edge pass rushers. By the way, he's pretty good against the run as well. He's 28 years old. He will be 29 when he reports to camp this summer with whomever he reports to camp with. But they got a lot of spots to fill, and Jonathan Grenard could be a piece. Now, to the emailers or people who tweeted to say, Kevin, what are you going to pay with? That's a good question. It's a really good question. They don't have a lot of draft capital. And that's why the conversation last week or the week before about Max Crosby was a tough conversation to have because Washington just wouldn't have the draft capital that a lot of other teams would have. Now, in Jonathan Grenard's case, let's see what Minnesota does here. Let's see if they get the right kind of offer. And if they don't, let's see if they ultimately release the player. He is due $19 million next year and the year after under contract, but none of that money is guaranteed by the Vikings. Let's see if people are willing to take on that contract for draft picks, because if they're not, it's very possible he could get released. I think that's a long shot, personally. I think it would take a day 2 pick minimum to get a Jonathan Grenard and maybe a day 2 pick plus. And Washington only has one day 2/night 2 pick. and that is a third rounder. Remember, their second and fourth round picks in this upcoming 2026 draft were spent last year on Laramie Tunsil. But I like Jonathan Grenard. I've liked the player for a while now. He has been, per a lot of the advanced numbers, a very good pass rusher, pressure rate, sack rate, etc. Tailed off this year in sacks, but he had himself some games, and he's been solid against the run. His PFF numbers for this past season were well above average, both as a run defender at 77.8, 60 is average, and as a pass rusher at 77.6, but had a couple of stellar games in both areas. Not terrible, but not great necessarily in coverage. But if you somehow put together, let's just say, a package of a third rounder, a fifth rounder, or maybe a third rounder this year and a third rounder next year, or a second rounder next year, something like that, and you put him just with Dorrance Armstrong coming back, if Dorrance Armstrong is healthy and ready to go at the beginning of the season, and then you add another pure pass rusher to the mix and you re-sign Jacob Martin, that's a start. If not a finish, it's not a terrible finish. It's maybe not Trey Hendrickson. It's not Max Crosby. It's not, Trey Hendrickson and Joey Bosa. Yeah, Washington's got a lot of holes to fill, people. There's not going to be a lot of time for nitpicking on some of the players that they sign. Remember, it's not in free agency just their choice. The player gets a choice in where he goes. Now, in a trade with a player under contract like a Jonathan Grenard, that's not the case. But I like the player a lot, despite what some of you believe to be chasing Vinny Serrato style. No, Vinny would have offered 2 future first rounders and maybe even number 7 overall. I don't think he would have done that, but who knows? It is interesting, though, to see the situation Minnesota's in, man. That team is in cap hell with a quarterback that they took and traded up to take, that I think it's becoming very, very apparent, especially if the reports out there that Kyler Murray is at the top of their list. If Kyler Murray's at the top of the Vikings list, you don't sign Kyler Murray to mentor J.J. McCarthy or even to compete with J.J. McCarthy. Maybe you do. Maybe the competitive part is a real thing. But that would be one of the quickest bails we've seen in recent NFL history when it comes to a quarterback. And even then, we'd have to say, check back with us in 5 or 6 years, because who knows with quarterbacks. But here we are 1 week exactly from the beginning of free agency. And it's going to be, I think, a very active free agency period. There are teams that have a lot of cap space right at the top: Tennessee, the Jets, and Washington, who all have major needs to fill. And yesterday's NFL news included Trey Hendrickson not getting tagged. That's a big deal. I saw a lot of, Cincinnati just made one of the worst errors in NFL history in, tagging Trey Hendrickson last year rather than trading him. And there were reports that certainly multiple day 2 picks were on the table for Trey Hendrickson, and maybe even a future number 1. Washington was definitely interested this time last year in Trey Hendrickson. I think they, like many other teams, found the price that Cincinnati was asking for to be too high. Cincinnati's being skewered right now because they're essentially going to let Trey Hendrickson walk for nothing. It's kind of the situation Washington was in, remember, with Kirk Cousins. They should have traded him. They should have traded him to the 49ers, who were offering, Jay swears, a first and maybe even a future first. Multiple very high picks for Kirk, but they didn't want to trade Kirk Cousins. Bruce Allen and Dan Snyder didn't, to the Shanahans. So they ended up getting a comp pick, and that was it for Kirk. The Hendrickson situation, though, a little bit different, in my opinion, in that Cincinnati thought they could win this year. They thought they could win big this year. And maybe they would have had Joe Burrow and Trey Hendrickson stayed healthy all season long. They lost their best player on offense and their best player on defense. That usually derails a season pretty quickly, and it did so for Cincinnati, even though they got decent quarterback play from Flacco when he came on board. But obviously 6-11 point to the games Burrow missed and defensively the games that Trey Hendrickson missed. But I was not necessarily on board with the killing of the Bengals. I don't think it's a good organization, don't get me wrong. But the reason they tagged him is and made him play for them last year is because, A, they did have an asking price that nobody apparently offered. Remember, Trey Hendrickson was given permission to seek a trade. And so they didn't get what they were looking for, in part because teams were going to have to pay Hendrickson what he thought he was worth in the moment, which was top of the market edge pass rushing numbers, which, of course, Myles Garrett set the record last year with his deal, and he's not Myles Garrett. No one is. But the Bengals kept him and tagged him, understanding there was a possibility they could lose him for nothing because they wanted to go for it last year. Washington wasn't really going for anything in 2017. I mean, you can say off of 2015 and 2016, they thought they had a chance to be a playoff team. That's true. And they'll tell you that one of the reasons that, you know, they thought they could still get Kirk signed at some point down the road. But they were being offered a lot for the quarterback that ultimately didn't want to play for them, and they weren't necessarily willing to pony up what Minnesota, the Jets, and other teams would ultimately pony up. But I didn't have a problem necessarily with what the Bengals attempted to do. If I were in Cincinnati doing a show, I'd be upset that they didn't trade him last year, but hindsight, as Spurrier once said, is 50-50. And it is easier to call that now going into 2025. The Bengals thought they had a chance to compete for a playoff spot and maybe even more. I think the strangest story from yesterday was, and it's not strange necessarily, but you wonder why, and that is why, you know, Drew Dahlman, a 27-year-old starting center, is ending his career after 5 years. This may be something that we start to see more of, especially for players that get paid, don't love the game as much. We'll see, but the Chicago Bears lost their starting center to retirement. How about Daniel Jones getting transition tagged? That seems a bit weird to me. The transition tag, for those of you who don't know, is rarely used. You have two tag opportunities, franchise and transition. You actually have exclusive and non-exclusive when it comes to the franchise tag. There are differences, but the transition tag is go ahead and make your best offer. We have the right of first refusal. And if nobody offers Jones a contract that he likes, then we get him for 1 year at about $8 to $9 million less than the franchise tag. It's 37.8 versus like 45 to 46. So to save $8 million and to clearly say to Daniel Jones, we're not sure, is an interesting move. Daniel Jones, of course, remember, not only tore his Achilles after playing really well, but he went out there in the game in which he got injured in with basically like a partially fractured tibia. You know, remember, he was going out there to play in a game against Jacksonville late in the season that they needed to have, and he was already hurt. But you know what? A minimum of $37 million for one season isn't bad for Daniel Jones. The quarterback thing we don't have to participate in this year, but it is going to be really interesting to see where these guys land. You know, from Kyler Murray to, you know, the situation in Arizona, who will they replace him with? Malik Willis in free agency, some of the older guys that there is some interest in. And then there was, I think, a very surprising report that the Giants are going to be releasing starting middle linebacker Bobby Okereke. I thought he was a really good player for the Giants. And in reading last night, he apparently is a top shelf high quality locker room guy as well. They are looking to free up cap space and moving on from him, a defensive team captain for the last couple of years, frees up $9 million. Bobby Okereke, at 29 years old, has played some pretty good football for the New York Giants, and I think some high IQ football for them for the last 3 years. There's some players out there, and this is, when you look at the free agency lists heading into free agency from, the last couple of months, doesn't include a lot of guys that between the end of the season and March 11th end up getting released by teams that you didn't necessarily anticipate as a fan, but I think a lot of teams knew would be available. Certainly, we got a lot to talk about, though, as it relates to how our team is going to start filling all of these holes. They've got a lot of them, including, their own players, many of whom are set to become unrestricted free agents a week from today. This will be, I think, a newsy week. It's been newsy every day this week, and I think it'll continue to be. So keep it here, and as news breaks, NFL-wise or otherwise with our team, we will keep you posted. All right, when we come back, Scott Van Pelt will join me. We'll talk about the Indy Combine and the fallout from that, who he likes in the draft and in free agency. And you'll hear his thoughts on a friend of his who just finished up quite the back-to-back. And that was Mike Tirico doing a Super Bowl and then the Winter Olympics. That's next. Scott Van Pelt came on with me the other day on my podcast. Wanted to play some of it back. The Indy Combine in the rear view, free agency ahead of us. And he had some thoughts on Mike Tirico's performance at the Olympics, which I thought were interesting. But I just started with kind of the Combine and coming off of it, how he felt. Does anything from the Indy Combine weekend change the way you feel about a player after watching him all season long?
No, it's funny. Stanford Steve and I were just talking about that. And I mean, the human context of things, the moments where the running back from Arkansas that had been at Buffalo and New Mexico State, who ran like a 4.33 and was in tears, and you think about what that could potentially mean, right? Does that change the trajectory of somebody? Because that's a pretty eye-opening speed for a running back. You know, those types of things are, I don't know, what's the word? Cool. I always hate that word. Feels like a catch-all. But I appreciate seeing those moments for somebody. But like, for instance, Carnell Tate ran slower than I think Reese, the defensive end / linebacker from Ohio State. But every time I watched Tate, I thought this is a great route runner, a great wide receiver. And I don't worry that, let's say Washington was able to get Tate at some point. Would I be worried that he couldn't play because he didn't run a great time? No, I just put the tape on. You know what I mean? I feel like, especially players like that have played a ton of high-level games in college football, the body of work matters a whole lot more than, 4.4 seconds of their life on a field in Indianapolis.
So do you, based on, being a massive college football fan, let's just talk about a couple of these players. Let's just talk about quarterback for a moment. Are you a believer in Fernando Mendoza, that he's going to be a great quarterback in the NFL, worthy of the number 1 overall?
I wouldn't say great. I'd be really hesitant to say great, simply because the NFL has failed so often at identifying anyone that's great at the next level, right? I'm impressed by what he showed this year at Indiana, and in high leverage moments, he was always really good. And I was on the field for a number of those games, Atlanta and Miami, and the ball went exactly where it was meant to go. Impressive, an impressive guy. But the Vegas situation, I mean, if their O-line's as bad as it was last year, I don't care who it is. Josh Allen would suck on that line, okay? I mean, I'm overstating it, but their O-line is that bad. So you have no chance if your O-line is horrendous. But I was impressed by what Mendoza showed in the biggest moments that you could possibly have in college, but I wouldn't say great, just because I wouldn't say that about any quarterback in this draft. I would hesitate to say that about really anybody coming out. A couple of years ago, when it was Caleb and Jaden, and
Drake May,
and the guy from Carolina that went to New England. Yeah, Drake May.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Right. Well, those three, the trio that went 1, 2, 3. Like I would say it about them. I thought they could be. These guys, I don't know. Mendoza, his situation feels really, really challenging because the Raiders have just been that bad.
How good do you think Jeremiah Love is going to be?
Excellent. I think his combination of size and speed is exactly what you'd hope for at that position. Then he went out and ran sub 4.4. He showed an amazing toughness 2 years ago when Notre Dame made the playoff, and he was injured. But he, fought through that one like Abdul Carter hit on the goal line for Penn State, if you remember, and just willed his way into the end zone. And then he's got real life straight line speed that's obvious, and I think he'll be excellent. I mean, the question is, do you take a guy at that position top 5, top 10? I mean, the returns we've seen for guys that are taken in the 4th and 5th round that are huge producers at that position always make me really hesitant to want to do that. But I mean, if you were Washington, you got there and you had a choice of say Bain or Bailey or one of these DNs or Love, what would you want?
I'd want Bailey. I hope he's the guy that's there at 7, or Caleb Downs. I mean, I think those are the two things that I've seen on the field produce, and Bain too. Reese, I'm hesitant on, and I just wouldn't take Jeremiah Love there only because I don't view him as Bijan or Gibbs or McCaffrey.
Nor do I. But
yeah.
you're okay. Yeah, but you just talked about like arguably the three most dynamic running backs in the National Football League.
I know
right?
that.
That's like when people do this. Okay, I interrupted you.
No, go ahead.
But I mean, I think when people do that thing about quarterbacks, where they're like, "Well, he's not Allen or Mahomes," or you're like, "Well, no shit. You just mentioned an MVP and a multiple Super Bowl winner. I mean, there's levels to this where you could be a really good quarterback, but you're not that. And so I think Gibbs, McCaffrey, and Bijan are truly special, difference-making type backs.
And that's what I would take that high. That's all I'm saying. Is
okay, right?
You said it.
I'm with you.
Yeah, I mean when you can get,
you'd have to know that.
Yeah, when you can get backs like DeAndre Swift or Kyron Williams, or I mean we've just seen backs second, third, fourth, fifth, day 3 picks turn into great backs. If I'm going to take a back in the top 10, I want to know that I'm getting Bijan, McCaffrey, Gibbs, or Saquon. And I view him as a faster version of Josh Jacobs, which, by the way, would be great. I mean, phenomenal.
Yeah, that'd be a hell of a player.
Be a hell of a player,
yeah,
but
that'd be
but not worth number 7 overall.
That'd be a home run.
Yeah.
That's fair. That's fair. I mean, look, in specific to Washington, I think your needs are probably greater along the Bailey-Bain type deal. I mean, Bain's the one all season long that I would joke around with Dusty Dvorak in particular when he'd come on with me. And I
love when he comes on with you. He's really good.
He's so. You're exactly right, and he's got this amazing want to, like this work ethic. He's flying from all over just to be part of our show, which we really appreciate. But we would laugh. I mean, we'd show Bain wrecking the film, and I'd say, no, you don't understand, Dusty. His arms are short. You're not going to want him,
right?
Because he's got short arms, and he'd love it, and he'd laugh. And I guess I don't know how he's able to sack him with these tiny little arms of his. And of course it comes up because he doesn't have long arms, but somehow miraculously, in spite of that, he's able to produce. That's what I guess I mean about the whole thing as it relates to the combine. That ultimately, if you've got several years worth of productive tape, I don't understand why one cone drill or whatever is going to suddenly talk you out of somebody. It doesn't make any damn sense.
Well, from 2023, and I did this in the Open, the biggest winner out of the Indy Combine, by far, consensus big winner, was Anthony Richardson. Because of course, at quarterback, Scott, you really want your quarterback to be able to broad jump 11 feet or vertical jump 41.5 inches. And he was an athletic freak. He ran 4.43. And look, maybe there's another act to Anthony Richardson. We've seen it with quarterbacks all the time. But, last year it was Shamar Stewart and Matthew Golden. And the guy that got panned, loser from the Indy Combine, was Luther Burden III, who I loved watching play at Missouri. And he fell into the second round. And look, why did he fall? Because his hands were small. He had 8.5-inch hands. And it wasn't like he was great this year, but you could see it coming at the end of the year.
Sure, he was a productive part of an offense that took a giant step forward in Chicago. That's it. I love the point you make, though, on Richardson, because this was a guy at Florida who was compelling athletically, but just hadn't played a lot of football. And look, at that position more than any other, people will squint to see what it is they want to believe they see. And nothing was a clearer illustration than Richardson of that. And, he comes in and he's had some moments where he threw some absolutely breathtaking, like 65-yard in the air passes to like Alec Pierce, I want to say is the one I remember. And okay, cool. And then what? I mean, it's, now he's going to, as you say, a second act, and perhaps he's still a very young man who hasn't played a ton of football. So maybe there's another chapter or multiple chapters for him. But you're right. He comes out of Indy and he went 4th in the draft, despite the fact that he hadn't played a lot.
Right.
It's wild to me how smart people seemingly fall for the dumbest tricks when it comes to, the draft.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I was going to ask you, what do you think the teams say about this past weekend? It's been, I mean, what do you think the teams get out of this weekend? Because you say they fall for the dumbest tricks. Do they? I guess they do occasionally. But what do you think they get out of it? Because, look, the attendance is lighter. More and more players are going to their individual pro day and individual workouts. I mean, I wonder whether or not we'll have an Indy Combine in 10 years. But, of course, we will if it's getting television ratings.
Yeah, I think it's the importance of it, I think, is dependent upon teams that have an approach that, if you like how you do it, you probably just go there just to do industry grab ass and hang out and go to St. Elmo's and eat steak,
Right.
and shrimp cocktail and see and be seen. I mean, it seems like that's as much of a part of it as anything, as everybody just goes to hang out. But I think you definitely, I would guess, I'm not part of a front office, I would think you want to go and spend time. If you like a guy but you haven't sat with him, like,
Exactly.
let's go sit with you in a room and have an interview and have a conversation. How do you react? And I'm not talking about these gotcha questions where I'm trying to see how you react and you say ridiculous things to people to see if they react negatively. I'm talking about just talking to a human being and finding out, like, do you really love this? Do you love the work? Do you love what it's going to be required to be great at this? Because we think you could be great at this, but we want to know how invested you are in the process of becoming, the best version of you that you can be. And, what can you really gather from somebody in that? I would think there's value in it. And that's the part that's worthwhile. Not so much, do you run 4.35 or do you run 4.47? That I think the human element would have value.
Who's the player that you really like in this draft? Is there one? I mean, we can focus in on Washington
Bailey.
at 7.
Like Bailey.
So do I. Have we talked about this before?
The other day, it's funny. The other night, Steve and I were talking about, it was like, I think it was Reese, Bain, and Bailey. And I said, who do you like the best of that trio? And I said, give me Bailey. And he said, that's funny. I think I might like him third. And I mean, I have great respect for what Steve sees through his eyes is very different because his eyes have been the guy on the field. He gets it better. I just felt like every time I watched Texas Tech, I felt like Bailey was destroying something.
100%.
And I just think he's got elite speed off the edge, and I don't think his arms are as short. Those short arms.
He's got long arms.
But
he's got long arms.
Yeah, longer.
Yeah.
I mean, Bain would be a winner as well. I think that's a position where if you're truly elite, your impact is almost immeasurable in how you can change games. So that's something that I would love for Washington to be able to land on.
Yeah, that's my guy too. It's because every time I turned on Texas Tech, he and that guy Rodriguez, number 10, were just ruining games.
Yep.
Over and over again.
The combination of those two. Yeah, you're exactly right. They seem to have let's meet at the quarterback plan, and it often was pulled off.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a chance. There's also a chance all of those defensive players and Sonny Styles after the weekend he had, because look, it's really important what Sonny Styles broad jumped. There's no doubt about that. I mean, he killed it. He did kill it, though. I mean, in terms of what you can do to elevate your stature before the draft, I think he did it. Like, I think even the teams that go there to play grab ass and go to St. Elmo's and just yuck it up and maybe, discuss a trade or two, they probably were, I think, paying attention to what Sonny Styles did athletically.
Sure. I mean, well, of course, because there's having elite athleticism and all those traits. There's no downside to that, obviously.
Yeah.
But as you and I think have probably said 100 times, like, we're not ever going to get to 4th and 2 and set up cones and do the shuttle time, and whoever has the best shuttle time gets to either possess the ball or you have to surrender it. Like, ultimately, can you play or can't you? And that's why I just don't get talked out of guys based on, poor tests, as opposed to buying into someone that hasn't shown it but tests well. So I think I'm probably being redundant at this point.
We're a week away from free agency. I mean, does anything interest you more than anything else?
I mean, I suppose let's speak of Richardson, right? Here's a guy that, got drafted high. It didn't work out. Well, Malik Willis was drafted in Tennessee in a terrible situation, had no chance. And then now has it would appear, played himself into an opportunity to go be a highly compensated starter somewhere based on a small sample size of solid play. But more than anything, Kevin, it's just the market that's just starving for anything that passes for being competent play, and him being, it would appear more than just competent, but like maybe having a chance to be good. Where does he land? I mean, there's a bunch of teams that clearly need some help. And so I think his next team is interesting to me, because if you're Miami or Pittsburgh or some teams Pittsburgh, we don't know what Rodgers will do, but there's, wherever he doesn't go now, they get desperate, and then you start swinging at something else, right? I mean, a year ago, I thought I couldn't have been more wrong last year. I thought Geno going to the Raiders. I thought, okay, yeah, Pete Carroll, Geno, that'll be good. They were a disaster.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I'm interested in often could be, I could be looking in the wrong direction, but it starts with Willis at quarterback.
Yeah, that's a good comp, too, in terms of Richardson. Could he land in a place in which because I think Willis landing in Green Bay with Matt LaFleur was obviously big for him. Not that Shane Steichen doesn't know what he's doing, because he does. All right. I saw something over the weekend that I had not seen, and I knew you felt this way. But one of my boys sent me the thing that you did about Mike Tirico off of the Olympics, coming from a Super Bowl to the Olympics. And I'll just let you tell everybody that didn't see it what you said about Mike Tirico as a broadcaster.
I just think he's reached a place that he's singular. I think he's the best broadcaster on television. And the ability to call the Super Bowl and then go call the Olympic Games as the host, and to do, I thought, to close out that remarkable gold medal game with a succinct and brilliant off the cuff, on the fly essay, it just puts him in a place that is singular in this profession. And what I said with Steve, and I'd say the same to you. You're one of my best friends forever. You've known me forever. Like, I don't want this to sound arrogant, and it sounds it when I say it, that having hosted as long as I have, I'm very confident about my ability. I don't overrate it, and Mike and I laugh. Like, we don't view what we do as being very important at all. We just talk about something somebody else does. I think I'm pretty good at that. But I don't think anyone's close to as good as Mike Tirico at that. And I rarely look at anyone else and think, geez, I don't have that shot. Maybe it's like walking up and down the range, and you're a pro and you've won some tournaments or whatever. I just keep this analogy going. And then you get up to like Woods and you see a shot and you go, well, shit, I can't hit that one. And I just think Tirico's ability as a broadcaster now is singular. And, Bob Costas was brilliant. Jim McKay was brilliant, but I don't think anyone was as gifted in both lanes as Mike currently is. And, he used the line, Kevin, that this was a generational build for the United States team. And I think for Mike, I know for a fact, this was a career that was all pointed towards these 3 weeks that he had and the opportunity to call a Super Bowl and then host an Olympiad, and to get it exactly right, in my opinion, all across the board is just an amazing thing. And, we've been very close friends. He and I did a radio show together, and we've been very good friends through the years. And so he eye rolls at me and gets upset that I make a big fuss about him because he doesn't overrate himself. But my God, what a run the man had doing his job, in my opinion.
Yeah, I actually think the thing that he's best at is play-by-play. And I think he's a very good host. Don't get me wrong, but I think he's become the best football play-by-play guy we have. Of all the number ones in the NFL in particular, I think he's the best. I think he understands the game the best from a play-by-play standpoint. I think he's incredibly, smooth, just is flawless, doesn't make any mistakes, works so well with basically anybody that you'd put with him. But I think that's his best thing. What do you think his best thing is?
the point you make regarding the play-by-play that I would add to is that his grasp of timeouts,
yes, that's
what coaches should be doing,
no doubt,
explaining it to the viewer, telling you, well, actually, they're going to, if they get this exactly right, they're only going to be able to milk the clock down to about 28 seconds. He's got the math in his head, his grasp of rules and applying the rules in real time in a way that isn't suffocating. It's actually making the broadcast better. I just don't think anyone's close
not
to
even
that
close
good.
to that. Nobody is.
And having done golf with him for a while, Kevin, there'd be situations where we'd be calling the Open Championship, and there'd be a rule situation, and I'd be thinking, I walked it with the RNA, and I'm not positive, is this stroke and is this drop, is this like, I don't know, and I'm kind of laying out to wait for somebody from the RNA to get involved and give me some clarity. And Mike inevitably, Kevin, would say, well, this is actually a situation I think where, but he would tell you exactly what it was, but he wasn't bogarting you.
Exactly.
Like he wasn't Rules McJohnny. And he wasn't trying to make anyone look bad for not knowing what he knew.
Yeah.
But so I guess I don't do play-by-play, so it's hard for me to, but I consume it, obviously. I watch games. All I do is watch games. I think he's the best there is at that, the administrative adjudicating all these things that can really be cumbersome and get in the way, but he does it in a way that makes the broadcast better. I think he's the best at that, for sure. But then just as a guy who is a host, to watch him be, I think he does something I admire, where he's able to talk with a smile, where he's smiling, and it sounds like, you know how you can hear a smile in somebody's, like, does that make sense?
Yeah.
When you're smiling and talking, it sounds different than if you're not. And he does it in a way that doesn't feel forced. I'm not great at that, and I admire his ability to do it. And as somebody that I joke with him, I've been nominated for an Emmy all these years, and I'm like, I see him do like the end of the gold medal game, and I think, well, shit, I'm not winning this year. It's just you see the ability, and I just marvel at it across the board. So I mean, either or, I don't think there's a wrong answer.
Well, per usual, you're selling yourself short on the hosting side, because I think you're every bit the host that he is.
No, I'm not. And I said I think I'm really good at it.
Yeah.
I'm just not that good.
Yeah,
I'm not as good
I
as
think
him.
honestly, I think as a host you are. In fact, I think there's a certain what's that word? Gravitas. I think there's a certain authority and gravitas that you have as a host. Sometimes it's just tone and voice. Sometimes it's personality that I think that you have that I don't think he has. I don't think that's his thing necessarily. He makes up for it in everything else, being, not only incredibly knowledgeable, but like you said, not only when he knows what the answer is, he's not telling you what he knows the answer to be. He's acting like, I'm pretty sure it's this, but he doesn't want to act like you said, rules McJohnny. He does a great job with that. But play-by-play wise, in terms of knowing the game, that's what I meant when I said, in terms of really having a feel for the game, I don't think anybody's even close to him. And he's great at it.
I agree. I marveled at it, and I saw someone put it kind of the way you were describing, that he does an amazing job of, he knows everything, but he doesn't talk like he knows everything. And there's a gift in that, because you can come off, it can be off-putting to be an authority on everything, but you want everyone to know you know everything.
Yeah.
He's never like showy about it. It's additive. It's never derivative in how he does it. So I don't know. He would be mortified to have this level of praise being given to him, because he just doesn't. He's not great at accepting it. I just said, please do me a favor and just let people say this stuff about you, because everyone means it. And I would think, to get this kind of praise from your peers, hopefully, is more validating. That's not the right word. More rewarding than anything else. When your peers have this much love for what you do, that's when you know you nailed it.
Talk to you later. Thanks.
Always enjoy it.
Scott Van Pelt, everybody. Nikki Javala will jump on with us at 11. When we come back, Marshawn Latimore got released at the end of the show on Monday. I was off yesterday. I will respond to some of you who are trying to hold me accountable for the trade next. Got this email from Bernie. Bernie writes, really hope to hear you do a mea culpa on the Latimore trade now that he's been released. Hope you don't forget when you get back. A big miss by your boy AP. Hope that benefit of doubt is fading for you. Thank you for that, Bernie. AP, of course, Adam Peters. So, first of all, Bernie, I bet you didn't think I would do this, but I did go back and find, because it's pretty easy to find all of your old emails to me. This from November 7th from this Bernie, 2024. Kevin, this is so much better than selling players! Exclamation point. Adam Peters pounced on a player that might be the difference between playoff wins and a big run versus a one and done. Let him cook! Exclamation point. That was the thing that took hold, remember, during 2024. And certainly, a year ago, it was all about let AP cook. Gotcha, Bernie. Yeah, look, I like the trade. Absolutely, I like the trade in the moment. And so did I based on my memory, so did a majority of you. Bill Barnwell, I went back and looked at this, gave Washington a B+ for the trade shortly after. And CBSSports.com gave Washington an A for the trade. But it didn't work out. Not every move is a home run. This was clearly Adam Peters' worst mistake, in this Adam Peters era so far. There's not even a close second at this point. But make no mistake, he's going to make more mistakes in the future because not every move hits. The draft is a 1 out of 3 proposition. Free agency, you hope, is a little bit higher than 1 out of 3 because you're spending big money in many cases. But you're still, in many cases, like the last 2 years in this offseason, you got a roster to fill. You're not going to get everyone right. You're not. Look, a third, a fourth, and a sixth round pick in the moment, November trade deadline 2024, with Washington sitting there at 7-2 and having a chance in that moment to be a 2 seed. It was trending in the direction of the NFC North winner being the 1 seed, Detroit or Minnesota. But Washington was in contention for the NFC East and a 2 seed overall, which meant the first 2 playoff games would have been at home before the NFC Championship game. Now, they ended up making the NFC Championship game anyway as a wild card team, winning 2 games on the road. But look, I mean, yeah, Bernie, I was wrong. If I could go back and have a different opinion, I'd say this is a terrible trade. He's hurt. He's been hurt. You're taking too much of a risk with draft capital. But look at who they had playing corner. I mean, Emmanuel Forbes, Benjamin St. Juste. They had a big problem at that position. And the defense was struggling. And they needed to try to improve defensively. They knew what they were offensively. They were a championship offense in 2024. They were a Super Bowl winning offense in 2024. But they were a bottom-feeding defense. And I still, it's easy to do this in hindsight, but you really have to grade a trade in the moment. And I graded it as, totally worth the roll of the dice. Totally worth it. Under contract, it wasn't a rental. The cap number the next 2 years wasn't going to be strangling by any stretch of the imagination. Bottom line is, he came in, was hurt, didn't acclimate, in that first, opportunity, ended up playing some regular season games in all 3 of the playoff games, then came back this year. There was more hope. One of the things that I wrote as keys going into 2025 is make a decision on Latimore sooner rather than later. If you made a mistake, admit it now and move on from it rather than trying to play it out. And they probably should have done that in the offseason last year, but he was healthier. He was adjusted to his new surroundings and new scheme. And look, he started and played in the first 8 games. I'll remind everybody the week before he tore his ACL against Seattle, that game against the Chiefs on Monday Night Football was the best game of his time here in Washington. There weren't many to choose from, but he was locked down, remember, in that game, especially in the first half. But no, I mean, grading it in hindsight, F. In the moment for me, A. You know, you get them wrong, and they get them wrong. But yeah, Bernie, nice try. You loved the trade in the moment, too. Let him cook, Bernie wrote to me after trying to get me to do a mea culpa. Apology accepted. Nikki Javala next. Nikki's actually scheduled for tomorrow at 11. We got our wires crossed, Nikki and I did. And so she's going to join us tomorrow at 11. Texts back and forth. Can you do 11 today or tomorrow? I can do 11. And I said, great, call you then. But she meant tomorrow at 11, and I thought she meant today at 11. So Nikki will be on with us tomorrow at 11, and it'll be great to have her when she comes on with us tomorrow at 11. Sorry about that, but we will do that with her tomorrow. So, I mentioned Jonathan Grenard to open up the show. Jonathan Grenard, by the way, had one of the best quick pressure rates in the NFL, according to ESPN. Quick pressure, which, you can picture Grenard if you've watched him play, Houston or Minnesota. He is quick twitch. He is one of those guys off the line of scrimmage, especially in a two-point stance. Look out. He is quick off the ball, and he was fourth in the league this year in quick pressure percentage. And I think he'd be a great addition. I don't know what the cost is. I think there's a chance based on his contract that he could get released. I think that's a very slim chance. But, it's a possibility. There's also a reuniting possibility with the D-line coach that he played for in Minnesota in Dallas. But Durante Jones here in Washington. So there are some familiar faces in other places. If indeed Minnesota does do what was reported yesterday by Schefter and Pelissaro and others, that the Vikings may be moving on from Jonathan Grenard. There's a lot of conversation about Max Crosby. Mike Silver in The Athletic just wrote a story. Max Crosby's ready to leave Las Vegas. The sooner the Raiders accept that, the better. That's not going to be an easy get. Max Crosby is at a tier above Grenard. Grenard, I think, would be in that third tier. Myles Garrett is in his own tier. Can we admit that? I think we can admit that Myles Garrett is in his own tier of edge pass rushers. He's number one. The next tier would be, for me, Watt, Parsons, Crosby. Am I missing somebody? If you go Garrett 1, tier 1, edge rushers, nobody's Myles Garrett. He's going to go down, people, as one of the greatest defensive players that's ever lived. And it's going to be a real interesting conversation because he's not going to have a lot of winning associated with his career. But he has been that dominant of a player. Garrett's in tier 1. I just put Parsons, Watt, and Crosby in tier 2. Who am I missing?
Nick Bosa, maybe?
Oof, a healthy Nick Bosa.
Exactly,
You're right.
Healthy Nick Bosa.
You're right about that.
Part.
I'm with you on that.
And then it gets a little bit kind of dicey. You got Hendrickson, Hutchinson, Will Anderson. I feel like is ascending into that tier.
Aiden Hutchinson. Is he in that tier 2?
I think we give it another year or two, but he's getting there.
What did he end up with this year? I'm just curious. In sacks after coming off the injury a year ago.
Now 14.5 sacks in 2025.
I mean, I think Hutchinson's in that conversation. Oh, wait a minute. Duh. Will Anderson Jr.
Yeah. Will Anderson
Jr. is actually maybe at the top of tier 2. I don't know how I forgot that. Will Anderson Jr. is at the top of tier 2. And I would put I'd take Watt and then Crosby and then Parsons. Parsons, to me, I love him. He is fear-inducing, but he's also kind of just that. He's not going to help you a lot against the run. Will Anderson Jr., and we're talking about edge players, not inside players. Because if we were talking about inside players, I'll tell you what, Jeffrey Simmons would be near the top of my list. But in terms of edge, Anderson Jr., Parsons, Watt, Crosby, Bosa, tier 2. Hutchinson. Hutchinson to tier 2. Then you go tier 3, Danielle Hunter, just as a pass rusher.
Sure.
Right? Benito.
Jared Verse.
Is Grenard in that tier 3? I think he
yeah, I would probably put him in. Let me pull up this little list.
I know.
ESPN's
I got to pull up a list too because there are guys that we're not even thinking of.
Would you look at that? He is in the honorable mentions along with Nick Benito, Brian Burns, and George Karlaftis. Jonathan Grenard. So, I guess the ESPN.
What did you pull up? A best edge pass rushing list?
Yeah, best edge from I think it's ahead of 2025. Yeah, from July. So this is not including this most previous season. So I think like you can make the argument that Will Anderson or Danielle Hunter have elevated themselves up this list just a little bit.
Yeah. I'm looking at just PFF put out a story after the season ranking the edge players from 2025. Will Anderson Jr. was actually number 1
That doesn't surprise me at all.
Followed by Garrett. And then it was Parsons, Aiden Hutchinson, Danielle Hunter. And then Nick Herbig from Pittsburgh was 6th. Josh Hines-Allen, he was really good in Jacksonville. Then Rousseau, Latu, the guy from Indianapolis, the kid from UCLA from the draft of 2 years ago now. Loved him coming out. Byron Young. Yeah, you're getting a lot. I mean, we forgot about the season DeMarcus Lawrence had in Seattle. Yeah. By the way, you know who's on this list is Chase Young after the season he had in New Orleans. I think that I think that Grenard's in tier 3. He'd be in that group with Verse. Man, Benito was so good this year. So good. Benito might be in tier 2 now that I think about it.
After this year, I'd be more than happy to hear you out.
He was just he's the now, 2020s version of what you're looking for. He's that long, angular build of quick twitch, but he's got bend, he's got speed, he's got, incredible get off, as they say, that the quick pressure rate. Benito's there, but Grenard's really, really good, people. For those of you who just saw that and saw people like me saying interested, this isn't a run-of-the-mill guy that just is a body filler or a roster filler with a body. Jonathan Grenard is quick twitch. He is a guy that he timed up the snap in our game against Minnesota so much so that Suter blamed a lot of what happened that day on Kingsbury. I think that was really Kingsbury's worst day. Remember, Kingsbury admitted what a bad day the Minnesota game was. But look, we've got Trey Hendrickson available. We may be having Jonathan Grenard available. Max Crosby's out there. I just think the cost of Crosby means Washington's out. I mean, I don't know that the Raiders are going to be interested in next year's first as part of the package. They're going to get somebody's first this year, plus, if they end up dealing him. Well, the story that you sent me from Silver, which you sent me during the break, I've not read it in total, but does he have a suggested price for Crosby or suggested landing spot for Crosby?
No, this is more about the just kind of how bad it is with Max Crosby. This is Mike
Silver, the guy that was here, that Rivera's friend, right?
I think so, but this is about how bad it's gotten with Crosby in Vegas.
I thought he was working for a team. I thought he was working for the 49ers. I didn't even know he was with the Athletic. So I guess here's the question. They've got to add edge pass rushers, plural. I mean, all they have coming back right now, and it's off a serious injury, in terms of a legitimate pass rusher on their roster at edge, is Dorrance Armstrong. That's it. I like Jacob Martin. He's a rotation player. I want them to sign Jacob Martin. I like Frankie Louvu a lot. I think there's a chance Frankie Louvu could have the kind of season he had in 2024, but maybe more so as a real threatening pass rusher. I mean, Aluvu, Armstrong, Grenard. Luvu's going to be an every down player. Grenard, by the way, is an every down player. Armstrong is an every down player. How do you see Washington solving their pass rushing need? It is, I think most of us would agree that heading into next week, it's the number one need. And there are several that you could consider. To me, you got to stop the run. You need run stoppers, but you need first and second, level defenders. Guys that can stop the run and guys that can get after the passer. I can't tell you what the new scheme and the new coaching is going to produce. No one can at this point. It's impossible to know for sure what Durante Jones is going to do and what he's going to be as a first-time defensive coordinator. It is true, though, that scheme and coaching can elevate. There's a more out of less coaching possibility. I just can't tell you that it's going to happen with Durante Jones because I don't know what it's going to be with Durante Jones, nor do any of you, all due respect. But it's not going to be the guy that we had for the first 2 years, who clearly was not a more out of less defensive coordinator. And look, that was Quinn's defense, and there's no way to say anything other than the defense in the first 2 years of Dan Quinn as a head coach, major disappointment. Never felt like they were getting more out of less. Never felt like other than effort and compete. And I think that's something that has been a hallmark of these first two seasons, including, with what they're looking for culturally in the players they add. But defensively, they were the ones getting outwitted more often than not. And the players weren't good enough on top of that. But you got to hope that the defense turns based on multiple things. Better players, better coaching, and better luck, keeping their best players healthy next year. And if all of that came together and you ended up with a defense that per, a lot of the key numbers, not just yards allowed, the traditional, statistic that people will look at and say, oh, that defense was ranked, 12th. And then you're like, yeah, well, that's yards allowed. But look, they were the, last on third down. They were a poor pass rushing unit. They got gashed against the run, and the reason they got or 12th is they were a great pass defense, but that's because teams ran it down their throat and had a big lead. There's a lot of that stuff that factors into that. That's why things like DVOA typically are much better indicators. And Washington was the worst defense at the end of the season in the NFL last year. From the Dallas game on, they were the worst. And expected points added per play in DVOA in almost every metric. They were the worst defense when they lost Dorrance Armstrong. I'm not going to put it all on that. I think it was faltering anyway. But I think that, pass rusher or pass rushers, plural, is number one on the list. And I want to know how you would suggest solving that problem. Trey Hendrickson, would you pay him? What is he going to command? Well, he's not going to command $46 million a year, which is what Parsons got in his new deal with Green Bay. He's not going to get what Hutchinson got at $45 million, or Watt at $41, or Garrett at $40. All right. Can he get in the $30 million range? Is he going to get a Nick Bosa contract, a Max Crosby contract? Those players are younger. Daniil Hunter signed his deal a couple of years ago at 35.6. He's 32 years old now. Can he get north of 30? Would you pay him north of 30, knowing that he is coming off an injury and he's an older player? Would you give up whatever it takes to get Max Crosby? Would you give up half of what it would take to get Crosby to get Jonathan Grenard? I'm talking in overall just guesses said this a million times over the years. When it comes to trade compensation, typically everybody's off on it. Hendrickson for big money, Crosby for big compensation, Grenard for less compensation. But maybe it's Grenard plus somebody else. Maybe it's Grenard plus Mafe. Maybe it's Grenard plus Owe. Maybe it's Grenard, Dorrance Armstrong, and you go after a Joey Bosa as just a pure pass rusher. 301-230-0980. 301-230-0980. How do you want the pass rushing need, which you could easily argue is the number one need, solved in this soon-to-be true offseason that begins a week from today at 4 p.m.? Kevin Sheehan Show, Team 980 to team980.com. Phone lines are open, 301-230-0980.
although I'm glad we found Jacob Martin. I think he's a nice rotational piece. Couple of things. First of all, can I ask you a question about Hendrickson? Where do you put him in your tiers of pass rushers? Because you didn't mention that.
Say that again.
Where do you put Hendrickson in the tiers of pass rushers, edge rushers you were talking about?
We didn't put him on the list. Hendrickson's in tier 2. He's in tier 2.
Okay, I agree. And so if we could sign Hendrickson, that would be nice. But Kevin, I told Max this, I think we need 2 players in free agency. And given what Hendrickson's going to cost, that might be unlikely. And Max just said he's interested in Tampa, apparently. What we absolutely need at edge is we need someone who's a stout pass rusher, which we do not have. And we need someone who's a stout edge setter, which we hope Weiss would be, but we lost him in the second game. And he's old, and I just don't know what he has. We're already bringing Armstrong back, who we all were happy with, who's coming off serious injury. So to me, you got to try and get 2 players in free agency. I'm interested in one or the other of Owe. I would prefer Owe or Mack. I don't see the Chargers letting them both walk. So one of those guys we should go hard after. And we'll see who the second one is. Maybe Grenard, but I think we need to get out of the business of trading draft picks for veterans we want. I think it's expensive, and I think we need to do better at the draft. You know, I'm banging that home every chance I get. Last thing, Bailey and Reese, wonderful players, but you can't count on them being there at 7. In fact, I think it's highly unlikely, and it's another reason why my strategy would be get the edge players in free agency, and then you really get into more of a BPA mode when you get to the 7th overall pick. That's what I do, Kev.
By the way, I hear you on perhaps solving this problem with multiple players, but I would also then look to the draft, hopefully at number 7, if one of those players is available. You know, the Khalil Mack thing, like I've thought about, like, you know, guys like Mack in Bosa. To me now they're at that age where they are specialty pass rushers. And we don't have any pass rushers, really. So specialty or 3-down players are all welcome. But I would definitely look at Owe, and I'd probably look at Owe a little bit more than Mafe. Owe, to me, has a chance to be kind of that 3-down player. He also really played well at the end of last year and played excellently in the playoff game. Kind of came on at the end of the year into that playoff game against New England when their defense was on the field for the entire game, remember? And he forced a fumble. He had multiple sacks. It was kind of like what Dorrance Armstrong did towards the end of that year in Washington in 2024. Owe, after, you know, moving from Baltimore to the Chargers, ends up really coming on at the end of the year. And, you know, he's right in that prime, man. You're catching him kind of at the beginning portion of his prime at 27 years old. I like that, but I don't like that as the only addition. Thanks, Kev, as always. Let's go to Rylan. Rylan, what is your pass rushing need solution?
Hey, Kev. Good morning, buddy.
Hey, what's up, Rylan? How are you?
Oh, good, man. Hope you're doing well. So I've been thinking a lot about this, and I think they either have to decide whether they need a Max Crosby and dish out the capital need to get him, or trade up to get one of the 4 studs that are so-called coming out of the top probably 5 in the draft. So depending on what Adam Peters and co think, I would say that if they go the Crosby route, complement with a lower tier draft pick. But if they want one of the top guys, trade to get one of them, and then complement that with a Grenard and a Bosa and whoever else may be out there.
Yeah, I mean, I look, they don't control what's going to end up being there at 7, and we don't even know the order in which they like the players. I mean, for all we know, Bain is there, and they don't care about the short arms. They see a 3-down player that's going to be an absolute edge-setting monster, and then, you know, because of his strength, he's going to be a really good pass rusher. I mean, in some ways, it's like a shorter-armed version of Montez Sweat to a certain degree. I love Bain, though. I mean, if you watched Bain at Miami this year, you didn't miss him. Like, it was impossible to watch them and not see the impact that he had, you know, especially in those playoff games. I mean, go look at the game he had against Texas A&M, you know, on the road in that first-round playoff game. But I don't know how they have them ranked. But I still hope that at 7, they've put themselves into a position to take the best player available based on what they do in free agency. But I hope that best player available ends up being a guy like David Bailey, personally. I do.
I would agree.
Thanks, Rylan. Appreciate it. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. We've got a phone line open if you want to weigh in. What is your solution to solving Washington's major need, which is pass rushing? Anthony, go ahead.
Kevin, real quick. Everybody knows you're a certified hoop head. But don't you think it's odd how your show centers on your second favorite team?
Wait, say that again?
I said everybody knows that you're a certified hoop head. Don't you think it's odd that your show centers on your second favorite team?
Why do you say that the Skins are my second favorite team?
Haven't you said multiple times that the Wizards are your actually number one team?
No.
So you're referring to Maryland basketball.
I've said that Maryland basketball is my number one. And the Skins in Maryland basketball have always been number one depending on the season. Take one or the other. And I would say that that's where we are right now, although there was a point here recently where the Skins kind of became 1A to Maryland basketball. But after those two, the Wizards are next. Yes.
Okay.
I love the Bullets Wizards. I've lived that my entire life. But no, that they're not my number one. They've never been my number one.
Okay. My mistake. I got that mixed up. As far as the subject at hand, if possible, they need to get 2 players, and preferably not just guys. They need whoever it is. I think Crosby is a non-starter because of the cost, but everyone else, they have to be a level above just a guy. And picking number 7, I think you can say without too much worry that at least 4 players, at least one of these 4 players will be there when they pick, whether it be Bain or the 3 linebackers. One of them will be there at 7. So
more likely than not, one of those guys is going to be there. If you include Sonny Styles in the mix, so now you have 5 defensive players that are all, at least as of today, kind of worthy of top 7. Reese, Bain, Bailey, Styles, Downs. Right? Am I missing one?
No, that's it.
Yeah.
So hopefully, hypothetically, say you can get Grenard and maybe one other player to go with them. So now you got your edge set. So you need a replacement at linebacker.
And you got Armstrong coming back. Let's not forget he was a very good player last year.
Oh yeah, he's in the mix.
Yeah.
So if that gets sewn up, you need a linebacker to replace Bobby Wagner. Mm-hmm. So then you potentially have your choice of Alvaro Reese, not so likely, but then Sonny Styles. That's your future middle linebacker. So actually, you're getting a 3-for-1 if you can find a way to fill those cogs. So that would be my strategy. Try to get at least 2 free agents that are at minimum a level above just a guy. And then of the 4 players available, draft that player to fill whatever need needs to be filled.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, it's one way to carve it up. I mean, by the way, I think ultimately going that strategy, you're really talking about not beyond the pass rushing need. You're talking about trying to find 4 guys in free agency that are above just a guy so that you can insert them into the starting lineup or they become a big part of your rotation defensively. And then at 7, you're trying to get that, you're trying to get the home run at 7.
Right. And number 7 can be any, if you do the other things, number 7 can be any guy. And when I talk about the edge people, I'm thinking Giants NASCAR package.
What?
When they went out when they beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl, they had 4 players rotating.
And they just
in
kept
and
drafting. They kept drafting in the same position. Yeah.
Right.
All right.
So there you go.
Thanks, Anthony, as always. Yeah, I mean, look, I think starting next week, and maybe even starting this week, I think you have to find 3 to 4 new defensive players that can start. 3 to 4. That's a lot in one off season. And then I think you need another 2 minimum that can be contributors, part of the rotation. I mean, I'm talking about like 6 new names and faces on defense. 5 to 6 minimum that you end up, feeling like you've upgraded on what you have. And, here's the thing we don't know. And I'm not telling you that this is impossible, although based on the performance last year, you might think it's impossible. But it's very possible that Durante Jones looks at, guys like Payne, Kinlaw, and Luvu, and Armstrong, and Amos, and Will Harris, and Sandra Still, and Wagner, if they bring him back, and he says, man, in my scheme, I mean, not only that, Jordan McGee, love the tape, totally fits. Kane Medrano, this dude is going to shock people next year in my scheme. Javonte John Baptiste, love what he did before he got hurt. Remember, he was part of the D-end rotation with Wise and Armstrong when the season started. He actually, I think, started or played more snaps than one of the two in the first 2 games before he got hurt. That was a bit of an underrated injury this year because he was part of that 3-man rotation. That's why Martin then started to get those opportunities. You don't know what the new defensive coordinator with his scheme thinks of our guys. We just know that our guys literally stunk last year, no matter who was calling the plays. And yeah, they were missing a lot of pieces, just like the offense, but it hadn't been good for a couple of years now. If you want to weigh in, you can fire in 301-230-0980. What is your solution to fixing the pass rushing need? I'll tell you what Von Miller said about staying in Washington. He's interested. And also, you'll hear him talk about Jaden Daniels. Both of those things when we return. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com.
So the next 2 weeks is what? You'd like to stay where you are? What's your plan on that front that you're willing to share? Vaughn?
Man, I'm a loyal guy. I would love to stay with the Washington Commanders. I fell in love with my teammates there. I love the way they run the organization. Adam Peters is great. Coach Quinn is great. I would love to be a Washington Commander. Now, if something were to happen and I'm not a Washington Commander, then I would love to go to the Denver Broncos. I think that would be. I didn't get that chance. I got traded whenever I was there. I didn't get that chance to have closure. I didn't get to walk into the stadium and be, okay, this is my last game, or I'm gonna do this with the fans on my lap. I didn't get that closure. So I would love to have, closure with the Denver Broncos. And if the Commanders don't want me, the Denver Broncos don't want me, it's a team out there that's gonna pick me up that would love to have my tricks on their roster. So
that was Von Miller with Rich Eisen. Would love to come back. But wouldn't mind going to Denver either. I don't think Von Miller's coming back. But there's this issue with pass rusher is going to start to get solved here in the next few weeks. 301-230-0980 if you want to weigh in with your solution to solving their pass rushing issue. Next hour, by the way, we'll get into something that somebody reported about Terry McLaurin over the weekend that we have not yet talked about. You'll also hear what Von Miller said about Jaden Daniels. Real quickly, from Bill Barnwell's story, I guess yesterday, he basically put the defensive free agents into tiers. And with respect to edge pass rushers, the tiers are franchise players, Pro Bowl caliber starters, capable starters, borderline starters, high-end backups, and then backups likely to net guaranteed money. And then he gets into backups likely to earn a roster spot. So there are a lot of names here. But let me just quickly kind of give you Barnwell's list. Trey Hendrickson wasn't even listed as a franchise player, which I think that's fair. Pro Bowl starter, Pro Bowl caliber starter. He's the only one of the edge rushers that are free agents that is in that category. Trey Hendrickson is a Pro Bowl caliber starter from Bill Barnwell's perspective. Projected average annual salary of between $25 and $31 million. $31 million would put him in the top 8 of average annual. That would put him ahead of guys like Burns and Benito and Sweat and Josh Hines Allen. And really it would be more because of his age. But behind guys like Bosa, Crosby, Hunter, obviously Garrett, Watt, Hutchinson, and Parsons. Parsons signed that deal last year, which was the largest ever for a defensive player. Capable starters, he's got Joey Bosa. He's got Chason from New England, which I like him a lot. I think he's going to end up back in New England. Khalil Mack, Boye Mafe, Owe, Kwity Paye, kind of keep forgetting about him, and Jalen Phillips. Phillips I love him as a player. It's his availability, both in Miami prior to getting to Philadelphia that would be the issue. Projected annual salary for those guys, $15 to $23 million per year. Now, he does not have Grenard here because Grenard's not a free agent. Grenard, I think, would be right there on the, capable starters, or potentially even looking at the capable starters list, probably ahead of those guys, maybe the second guy next to Hendrickson as a Pro Bowl caliber player. Then borderline starters, he's got guys like Chubb and Clowney, and Abegati. Abegati is the guy that grew up here, went to Einstein, has played with Atlanta the last few years. He's got the guy that I mentioned the other day. I like A.J. Epinesa in Buffalo. I think he is a starter, certainly on a team like Washington. Joseph Asai in Cincinnati is a guy that Logan Paulson likes a lot. Hassan Reddick is on that list. And then he's got backups, guys like Jacob Martin, but will likely net guaranteed money. He's got, who else is on this list of names that would be interesting? How old's Cameron Jordan now? He's got to be 35, right? God, he still can play, though. Let's see where else he's got our players. Backups likely to earn a roster spot. He's got Dietrich Wise on that list. All right. Let's go to Los in D.C. Los, what's your pass rusher solution this offseason? Go ahead.
Hey, Kevin, how you doing?
I'm good, Los.
I would, if preferentially, I would go with Henderson. I think it's time that we spend some of that money, man. Sitting on it, talking about how much we have for the last 2-3 years. Enough of that. It's time to attack. It's time to go out there and spend some money.
Yeah, I agree with that. Thanks for that. By the way, this from Chuck. Chuck writes, you can pass rush from the defensive tackle position. Yes, I'm very aware of that. I am. And remember, they're keeping Payne. Kinlaw played well last year. You still have Newton. I do like John Franklin Myers from Denver. Like if they were to look at somebody inside in free agency. I'm looking to see where he's got him ranked. Barnwell. He's got capable starter. John Franklin Myers. Chris Jones is the franchise player. Is Chris Jones available? And then he's got actually Deron Payne as a starter along with Eric Armstead if Payne was a cap casualty, which he's not going to be. You know who's out there? Tim Settle. Remember our team drafted him when he was 20 years old out of Virginia Tech. He's now played 8 years in the league, and he's been a good player in the league since leaving here, both in Buffalo and then this year in Houston, even though he got hurt. But he was a part of that dominant defense for, let's see how many games he ended up playing before he got hurt this year. 12 games. 17 last year, though. JYD, finish it up for us. Go ahead.
Well, I know one thing is not going to be Bosa won't be on the list. Don't want him stays hurt too much. I don't think the guy Khalil Mack. I don't think he's leaving San Diego.
Yeah,
you might get the other one from San Diego or whatever. But you know what? I just don't see. I just don't see too much that Washington's going to be able to do in free agency, really. Because there's no point in bringing a bunch of old guys here that all they're going to really wind up is on the scrap heap or whatever.
Well, there are more than just old guys available as pass rushers in free agency, JYD.
Well, you have to go out. You got to go out there and get the kid. Try to get the kid from San Diego, Oweh. Or whatever.
Yeah, he's 27. Yep.
And
Mafe might be younger than that. How old's Mafe? 27 too. Yeah.
I would go. I would. You know what? I would try to go with those two.
Okay.
Whatever. I would try to persuade Oweh to leave, and then I still say everybody keeps talking about the draft. If I'm still saying. If the kid Love is there at 7, you got to take him. He is just like Christian McCaffrey.
I think he's really good. I don't think he's Christian McCaffrey. He's not anywhere near the route runner. Christian McCaffrey's a borderline receiver.
Christian McCaffrey.
All right. Well, we'll see. Time will tell. Thanks, as always, JYD. From Mal writes, they've gotten all of their cap money, Sheehan. All of the players they could release have been released to save cap-wise. They kept Payne. They kept Allegretti. The other big chunk of cap savings relief could come from a Tunsil deal in which the cap number would be lowered in the first year. So if Tunsil gets extended, before we get into the heart of free agency, that would more likely than not result in more cap space available for Washington. That would be the remaining opportunity for a big chunk of more cap space. All right. When we come back, I want to get into the wide receiver position, not just now, but beyond this upcoming season. And something an NFL writer wrote after the combine that I missed. Maybe you guys didn't, but I'll share it with you when we come back. We've got some NFL news. It's newsy this week for sure, between the combine and leading up to free agency. Big trade in the NFL. Just reported minutes ago by Adam Schefter. No, it's not involving our team. The Rams traded for Trent McDuffie, the corner from Kansas City. I'd put him right up there, on the short list of the best corners in the league, with Surtain and Gardner and, I think Quinyon Mitchell's starting to get into that category, and Stingley Jr., Gonzalez. You can keep going with the list, Max. Witherspoon. I don't put Witherspoon in the Gonzalez class. Witherspoon's really good, though. But listen to what the Chiefs get back from the Rams for Trent McDuffie. The Rams' first rounder this year, which is number 29 overall, a fifth rounder, a sixth rounder, and a third rounder next year. The Rams, they are the kings of going for it, man. They are the kings of, we like knowns rather than maybes. That's our thing. And that's what they do. They don't mess around with, first round picks. Here's Field Yates. Since 2017, when Sean McVay arrived as the Rams head coach, Les Snead, the GM who was there before Sean got there. 2017 first round pick traded to the Titans. 2018 first round pick traded to the Patriots. 2019 traded to the Falcons. 2020 traded to the Jags. 2021 traded to the Jags. 2022 traded to the Lions. We know that was for Stafford. 23 traded to the Lions. 2024, they selected a player in the first round with their own pick, Jared Verse. Not a bad player. 2025 pick traded to the Falcons. 2026 now traded to the Kansas City Chiefs. That's what the Rams do. Big trade. Trent McDuffie on his way, the great corner from Kansas City, on his way to the LA Rams. Clearly, you've got to assume, if you didn't assume it already, Matt Stafford's coming back. You don't make that trade unless you think you are a few players away from the Super Bowl, and they, were a few plays away from the Super Bowl this year. And I personally think the same result we saw with Seattle against New England, we may have seen it play out a little bit differently in terms of the game and the score, because the Rams were not as good defensively as Seattle was, but the Rams would have lit New England up, I think, in the Super Bowl as well. It's weird about this past season. I still think the Rams may have been the best team. I do think the Rams and Seahawks were the two best teams, although I still would have loved it if Houston had not put as much as they put on C.J. Stroud in that playoff game at New England. Because I think if they punt it 12 times instead of letting him drop back and throw it over and over again, I think they may have been in the Super Bowl. Can you imagine a Houston-Seattle Super Bowl? Look, the Patriots defense was really good too. But there you go. Big trade in the NFL. I wanted to play for you something that Von Miller said in his interview with Rich Eisen over the weekend. I think this was from the weekend. About Jaden Daniels. I played for you a little while ago, Max did, what he said about how he'd love to return to Washington, and if not, he'd love to, go back to Denver to finish up his career. Here's what he said when he was asked about Washington's young quarterback, number 5, Jaden Daniels.
I hear you completely. You got a good Jaden Daniels story for me, Vaughn, where you're like, you first realized, okay, he is the guy, or anything that might shed light on him?
I've been around a lot of great quarterbacks. This is a Jaden Daniels story, but I always got to bring Josh Allen into it. Josh Allen, man, he is a unicorn. Not just a great player on the football field, but like that's the quarterback that you want whenever you're building a team. It's more than just playing great on the football field. It's more than just having a great arm strength and the angles. Like, he has all that. The way he moves around the locker room, the way he moves around that facility, it energizes guys. He's a jokester, a prankster. It's Josh Allen, but he has this way of dropping your guard and making you feel like you're one of the guys when you're on his team. Jaden Daniels the same way. Not as pranky, not as chatty as Josh Allen, but he just has this way of dropping your guard and making you feel part of the team. Jaden Daniels, he's a special talent. He can run, he can pass, he's smart. And I think the things that really stood out for me is he just has that moxie. Whatever that meaning is, he just has that confidence. Like, the game is never too big for him, it's never too small for him. Sometimes you can observe quarterbacks and they just look afraid out there. Never has that been the case with Jaden Daniels, no matter who we playing. He's a warrior, has some great traits of the late Kobe Bryant. And that's the type of personality that you want with your quarterback.
I like Von Miller, listening to Von Miller. I think he's going to be a very good, broadcaster if he chooses to do that after his career is over. But high compliments, of course, for Jaden Daniels. I mean, putting him into that Josh Allen kind of conversation is certainly look, I feel the same way, and I can't wait to see it, and hopefully 17 plus games healthy in 2026. So something that I missed from over the weekend that I didn't talk about on Monday that I wanted to get to, Matthew Berry, who is a Skins fan, has been lifelong. He's the fantasy guy that was with ESPN for a long time. And who's he been with? I think NBC recently, part of the Sunday night crew. He, after the combine, wrote down 35 things that he took away from many conversations at the combine. And he had multiple, takes on Washington. There were three of them in particular. I'm sorry, four of them. No, three of them in particular. He wrote on NBCSports.com, quote, "I'm told the Washington Commanders want a thumper. And by that, I mean a true early down star running back. They felt like once Austin Eckler went down last year, the run game struggled. They think Chris Rodriguez is a nice back, but don't like him in the passing game. And they clearly found something in Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, a.k.a. Bill, but think of him more as a 2 or a 3 than they do a true lead back. My guess is the running back who leads Washington in touches next year isn't currently on their roster." Now, let me just add to this. So Matthew Berry not only is, the fantasy guy at NBC, and he used to be that guy at ESPN, now is at NBC. He's a huge, lifelong Washington fan. And so he's at the combine, and he's talking to a lot of people, and he's got a lot of takes. These aren't just random takes. They're based on talking to people. I would imagine people with the team, but I don't think this team leaks much. Agents, players, other teams that think they have some insight as to what Washington is thinking, or maybe their own evaluation of Washington's players. That one was interesting because they may have a chance to draft a thumper. They may have a chance to draft a true lead back at number 7 in Jeremiah Love. So that was number 1. Number 2 is he wrote, asking a team source about new offensive coordinator David Blau, I was told to expect the offense to look like a Ben Johnson offense. A lot of motion, play action, strong run game, and some trick plays. Yeah, I don't think that's a big reveal. I think certainly we're going to see a lot more of, really run game tied to play action pass attempts. To me, that's going to be the number one difference that you can quantify, that you'll be able to quantify from 2024, 2025, and then 2026, is the number of play action pass attempts in this offense. Washington was 20th in play action pass attempts in 2024, and then 27th, with primarily Mariota taking the bulk of the snaps in the league, 27th in 2025. Ben Johnson with Caleb Williams last year, number 1 in the league in play action pass attempts. The year before with Jared Goff in Detroit, number 2 in the league in play action pass attempts. I think that's what we're going to get in terms of the biggest difference. To me, yes, some trick plays. Blau apparently is very creative, but a run game that's tied and married to true play action, and not just play action in the pocket, but play action bootleg with Jaden. That will be the thing that you'll be able to look at more. Under center will be too. The under center snaps will increase dramatically. But in terms of play style, play action pass attempts will go up. All right. Lastly, Matthew Berry from NBC Sports, after the combine this weekend, wrote the following. As long as we're talking Washington, I don't expect Deebo Samuel to return to the team. Yeah, I agree with that. The team will look to add to the wide receiver room with an emphasis on speed. And then he wrote this, and don't be surprised if 2026 is Terry McLaurin's last year with the team. To that end, one source told me that while almost everyone expects Washington to go defense in the first round this year, if the top 3 edge guys are all gone by 7, don't be surprised if the Commanders take Carnell Tate, wide receiver, Ohio State. Look, I think that I wouldn't be surprised. And I think a lot of you, based on all the conversations we've all had since last summer, that it would not be a major shocker if this was Terry's final year upcoming. The real issue with, Terry beyond this year is that he then becomes paid big time and cap hit big time. The deal he got from the team last year was a deal that said, we really appreciate what you've done, and we really want you to be a part of the next 2 seasons at the very least. And we're going to give you $44.5 million guaranteed, which we don't have to give you. And they gave it to him. But the way the contract was structured is that the overall $97 million number that the agent was able to kind of float out there as, hey, look, we won the deal. No, you didn't. Is really only $44.6 million. And basically, they don't really have any legitimate commitment beyond 2026. It was essentially a 1-year contract extension on the year that he already was under contract for, which was last year. Because in 2027, his cap hit is $34 million. In 2028, it's $39.5. There's no way, barring an absolute killer season, a season he's never had as a wide receiver here. Now, a lot of that hasn't been his fault. I'm not blaming him for it. He didn't have a quarterback until 2024. And then last year, obviously, he was hurt. But I'm talking about a bona fide, like legitimate, upper tier wide receiver season. I'm not talking about, the best season of his career was 82 catches in 2024, 87 his second year. I've got it in front of me right now. I'm talking about 100+ catches. I'm talking about 1,500 yards, not just breaking the 1,000-yard barrier. And I'm talking about another season in which he is well into the double digits touchdowns-wise, and his average, catch is 15 yards plus. Like a bona fide star season. He's had bona fide, really good seasons for a receiver. He hasn't had a bona fide star season. When the most catches of your career is 87 and the most yards of your career came in your second year, 1,118, you haven't had a superstar season. Barring that, I agree with Matthew Berry. I think we're in for, this is going to be the final year of Terry McLaurin with this team, which means you've got to go get receivers. You really have to get receivers. Trey Burks is not the answer. I don't think Luke McCaffrey is the answer, all due respect. I don't think Jalen Lane is the answer. We know Robbie Chosen and Chris Moore and Noah Brown aren't the answers, and whomever else played for them last year. Who were some of the receivers that played for them this year? They got to go get they have to get a receiver in this offseason. I know we've talked about it to a certain degree, but Matt Berry's not giving us a big reveal. It wouldn't be a shocker if this were Terry McLaurin's last season. It shouldn't be based on the contract that he got if you were paying attention to the details of the contract. If he had a great season, he would be under contract for 2027. He is, and 2028. But, moving on from him would be a massive cap savings. They would basically end up saving, $16 million off the cap if they moved on from him after this season versus a $34 million cap hit. He'd have to have a phenomenal season and then really balk at any sort of restructure for them to take him back at a $34 million cap hit in 2027. They got to go get a receiver, Max. They have to go get a receiver in this upcoming draft, upcoming free agency, and maybe even in the draft. Well, I think Carnell Tate's an absolute possibility. But think of it this way, too. If you're not going to have Terry in 2027, you need more than one receiver. You got to start thinking about two receivers. Alec Pierce is going to be a lot of money in free agency. But Romeo Dobbs, Juwan Jennings, Wan'Dale Robinson slot, Ayuk, we'll see what happens there. Pittman Jr., if he ends up being a cap casualty in Indy. Shaheed, I bet he stays in Seattle, don't you think?
Yeah. I mean, on the note of receiver, there was something that got put out this morning by Jonathan Jones, who I believe has been on the show before.
Yes.
Mike Evans, free agency is set to hit soon, and he says if Evans does not return to Tampa Bay, keep an eye on the Bills, Chargers, Niners, Commanders, and Giants. His price is going to be difficult to gauge, though. He will be 33 this season, coming off an injured year, and there aren't many comparisons to him out there right now.
Yeah, he missed some games this year. A lot of games.
Did.
Hurt them a lot.
Did.
Our front office has put a real emphasis as far as Terry goes on wide receiver aging analytics.
Yeah.
So I don't see Mike Evans landing here.
Sources believe he will get close to something. He wants $25 million a year, about a 2-year deal, but sources believe he will get something closer to $20 million per year. So we'll see how Adam Peters wants to penny pinch this one.
Yeah, I would definitely look at the younger wide receiver possibilities.
For sure.
I mean, in free agency, but at number 7, Carnell Tate is a possibility. But, something just to keep in mind that, Washington's going to have real receiver needs coming up here. They've got one now. They have to, you got to have another wide receiver playmaker on the field. I mean, I know what they got away with in 2024. Terry is their number one with, Noah Brown and Diami and, and Zacchaeus, et cetera. Austin Eckler also was a key player on that team when he was healthy. They were much more dynamic with him on the field, and he was a versatile 3-down back if you needed him to be a 3-down back. Yeah. I mean, it reminds me of, 2016 when they were on the verge of losing Pierre and Deshaun the following year after 2016, that those guys weren't going to be on the team anymore, and you had to start making plans. That wide receiver is on their list here, whether it's free agency or the draft. And my personal view at this point is that Jalen Lane's not the wide receiver, the number 2 wide receiver, or even maybe more of a gadget guy, but I don't know that they've got their number 2 on the roster. I think that's pretty easy to say, don't you think? I mean, Trey Burks was once a first-round pick, but they picked him up off the street this year. So, yeah. Wide receiver, running back, edge pass rusher, run stoppers, linebackers, a corner. By the way, I was thinking about this, and maybe we talked about this with Ben the other day. I forget if we did or not, or didn't. But it would not surprise me at all if Jonathan Jones is brought back, if they try to re-sign him. Their corners right now, are Amos coming off an injury, Sandra still in terms of under contract, and no one else is under contract. Amos and Sandra still are their only corners under contract right now. So whether it's Noah I or Jonathan Jones, I expect them. I think Jonathan Jones is a guy they're going to want to bring back. I actually think he played okay for them last year. He's an older player, you know. Kicker, add that to the list because they're not going to bring Jake Moody back, according to reports the other day. Whew. We're going to have a massive roster turnover, and it's got to be with contributors, especially on defense, and you need another one or two on offense as well. I got a what do you got when we come back? I'll talk about that, and then we'll talk some Wizards with Josh Robbins from The Athletic. Trae Young getting ready to start. The Wizards have done a nice job here recently. They're on a nice streak of losing games to really kind of start to solidify a bottom four position. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. Well, we've had, some NFL schedule news over the last 24 hours. Atlanta's going to be the host of the game in Madrid this year. So we're really filling out that international slate. Washington, of course, is going to play a game in London. The only actual matchup we know for sure is San Francisco and the Rams in Melbourne, Australia. Although there is some belief that the Saints will host Cleveland in the Paris game. There's been some reporting, but no official announcement. But now, Max, we have our first preseason matchup announcement. The first game of the 2026 season and preseason, that annual Hall of Fame game from Canton, Ohio. This will be played on Thursday night, August 6th, 8 p.m. kickoff in Canton. The two teams playing in it will be the Arizona Cardinals and the Carolina Panthers. Those two teams will have two significant historical figures in their organization going into the Hall of Fame that weekend. Larry Fitzgerald will be going into the Hall of Fame, and so will Luke Kuechly. Both of those players heading into the Hall of Fame that weekend. So Cardinals, Panthers, get ready for, I don't know about you guys, but I don't watch a lot of preseason football, but that very first game, the Hall of Fame game, just to see it back on television again is always we got football. And then you can start counting the number of weeks from that weekend on that you'll have football on television. So the NFL has announced Arizona and Carolina in the Hall of Fame game August 6th in 2026. We are still, we're about 5 months away. 5 months away from that game. And remember, that game is about a week into training camp. And then the following weekend, you end up getting all of the preseason action. That's a late start for the preseason, though, right? Yeah, because it's a late start to the regular season. So second weekend in August for the first preseason game will be a late start. So there you go. Some NFL schedule news. When we come back, we'll talk some Wizards with Josh Robbins from The Athletic. Why are they going to trot Trae Young out there tomorrow night for the first time? That and more next. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, theteam980.com. Don't forget, you can download and listen to us wherever you are, whenever you want with the Odyssey app. And you can watch this program on our Team 980 YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe button and hit the like button when you get there.
Johnson, Bilal Coulibaly, Riley, Reese, and Carrington. Your 5 on the floor to start this third.
Get some spacing right now. Riley, that's nice.
Side to side.
Tell you that Will Riley, he's one of those youngins that look good right now. He is a rookie. He had 19 last night in the Wizards' loss, a good loss to Orlando, 126-109. They've now lost 6 in a row. If you look at the standings, they have the 4th worst record in the league. That's where they kind of need to hang out there, right in that bottom 4. They are 2 games worse than Utah for the 5th worst record. You don't want to be there. And they play Utah tomorrow night at home, a game that will mark the debut for Trae Young. Joining us right now to talk about that and more is Josh Robbins. Josh does a very good job covering the Wizards for The Athletic. You can follow him on X at Joshua B. Robbins. So that's where we'll start, because the last time I had you on was after the AD trade, and that followed the Trae Young trade. And I was under the impression that, trading for the 2 injured players gave them at least an excuse that CJ McCollum didn't give them, which is they can actually sit them because they're legitimately hurt. But now we're going to see Trae Young. Why?
I think it was getting increasingly difficult for anyone to believe that he was hurt. Remember, he played, I say remember, of course you remember, and the listeners remember, he played on December 27th in Atlanta, and then that was after he had played in several games even before that, following the MCL sprain. He was then held out of the next games by Atlanta because of what the team said was a quad contusion. Quad contusions hurt. I know, I've had them, and I'm not even a professional athlete, but it largely probably was because the team and Trae Young had decided that they were going to seek a trade and they didn't want to risk an injury. There's been so much scrutiny from the league on these teams about potential tanking that at some point, especially with all the controversy about tanking, it wound up snowballing to the point where I think it had to happen, where the Wizards wound up having to play him. These are my opinions. I can't support it by any reporting other than common sense. But there you go. He's going to come back tomorrow night, play 17 to 20 minutes.
Is it going to have to happen at some point with AD?
That's unclear. That he has been, not only has he been to a hand specialist, but the Wizards also cited the hand specialist by name in their press release of about 2 weeks ago, which is a sign that the hand specialist does acknowledge that that ligament could use some more time. So, I wish I had a definitive answer for you. Mm-hmm. I don't have one.
So 17 to 20 minutes a night for Trae Young, and we'll see how long that lasts. What kind of risk does that pose, in your opinion, to obviously the goal, which would be to finish in the bottom 4 in the league and not above that? Not that, they would lose the pick automatically, but we know that there's no way to lose it if they finish in the bottom 4. It would be, and I think you and I have had this conversation before, absolute organizational malpractice for them to lose that pick after the draft lottery, in this particular draft in particular. So I'll just ask you, it's Trae Young. Him by himself isn't going to – I love the prospect of him and AD next year playing together, but does it pose any risk to finishing above the Final 4?
Yes, it does pose risk. There's no question about that. But it depends on how creatively it's managed. So last night, the Wizards had 9 healthy players. Keyshawn George out because of an elbow sprain. Other players, Alex Sarr continues to be plagued by what the Wizards say is a hamstring strain. Jameer Watkins suddenly has a foot sprain. So if they play Trae Young alongside two-way guys, including Juju Reese, who until Monday night had never played in an NBA game, then there is a limit to how effective even Trae Young can be. And that's some of the brilliance of this Wizards operation here, is that they're finding a way to field a team that is playing hard, but there's always going to be a limit for the most part. Even if you put extremely talented players alongside very young, very inexperienced fringe prospects. And I think that's probably going to be the way the Wizards approach it tomorrow night. And then there are certain X's and O's things you can do within a game that are kind of under the radar. Like, for example, guarding Paolo Banchero last night with single coverage, that can help.
That's a good one. Like, yes, this is why I think we've had this conversation before. This is why it's like impossible to evaluate Brian Keefe as a head coach. There are two different skills very often, the development of players and then the coaching, in-game coaching of said players. Sometimes coaches are good at both. Sometimes they're only good at one. Sometimes they're not good at either. But you pointed this out the last time we had a conversation, and it's exactly what Will Dawkins told me when he came on with me 2 weeks ago. And that is, they're ready for their young players to develop in a legitimate atmosphere. Playing meaningless games is not the best development environment. When you're not looking at the standings and your opponent isn't really taking you seriously, it's not the best of developmental situations. You'll learn a lot more when they're playing meaningful games, and they want to get to that next year. And that'll be fun when we finally do get to it. You wrote, and I read this, and I want you to explain to everybody, why you wrote this story and what the results were. But you wrote about, tanking, that NBA GMs and owners haven't been the only ones embracing tanking. Fans don't mind it either. Explain.
Well, you asked me why I wrote the story. I wrote the story. I was assigned the story, but I was more than happy to receive the assignment, excited to receive the assignment, because it's germane to the NBA right now. And the Wizards are example 1A to all this. Yet the Wizards fans have been sold hope, and rightly so, because for years and years, and most particularly the Tommy Shepard years, the Wizards were on that treadmill of mediocrity, something that even Adam Silver acknowledged at All-Star Weekend is a very dangerous place to be. And the Wizards fans themselves had signaled to the franchise before Tommy Shepard was fired that they wanted to get off that hamster wheel and that they wanted a more hopeful direction. And I think you see that, and my reporting confirmed it, that there's a significant segment of the fan base that would rather see the team stay away from being mediocre and bottom out for at least the rest of this season and probably ending this season in search of a top-level draft pick in a absurdly loaded draft. And I